Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this.
Hmm.
Just yesterday, Thursday, large parts of the internet seemed to, well, wobble.
Mm-hmm.
Services you likely use every single day were acting up or just, flat out unavailable.
Yeah.
So what happened? We're diving deep into a pretty significant disruption experienced by Google Cloud. It's one of those fundamental pillars holding up so much of our online world.
It really is.
We've got the key accounts and analysis right here, and we're going to walk through exactly what went down, who got hit the hardest, and what this tells us about the complex digital infrastructure we all depend on.
Right.
It was definitely a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of people, I think.
What's fascinating here, and maybe a little scary, is how quickly a problem at this sort of foundational layer can just cascade through the entire digital ecosystem.
Exactly.
This wasn't just some minor inconvenience. These events, they really reveal the intricate dependencies built into the services we interact with constantly, often without even realizing what's underneath.
Yeah, the stuff behind the curtain.
Exactly. Understanding these moments gives us a much clearer picture of you could call it the digital supply chain, and where the really critical points are.
That's a perfect way to frame it. So let's trace the timeline a bit. According to the reports we've seen, this all began on Thursday, June 12th, 2025.
Yesterday, yeah.
And the initial signs of trouble started emerging around 10:51 a.m. Pacific time, give or take.
And crucially, this wasn't just a brief flicker. The disruption went on for several hours, leading to what was pretty quickly described as widespread outages. Google's own status dashboard, the official source, confirmed issues. It noted multiple GCP products were experiencing service issues, pretty broad.
And at that point, Google's public stance was basically, our engineers are investigating.
Yeah.
But crucially, there wasn't a clear timeline given for recovery, not acknowledged anyway.
Right, and that uncertainty early on, that just adds to the anxiety, especially for businesses who rely heavily on the platform.
Of course.
Absolutely. I mean, diagnosing problems in systems this large, this distributed, it's inherently complex, no doubt. But the lack of a quick resolution or even just an estimate, that certainly amplified the impact for everyone watching.
And the impact was felt far and wide. This is where that domino effect you mentioned really comes into play. So who was actually struggling because of this?
Well, the list of affected services, it really highlights the breadth of Google Cloud's reach. Think about e-commerce, for example.
Okay.
Shopify, a massive platform. So many businesses use it to sell online. They publicly acknowledged problems, said many of their services weren't functioning properly, specifically citing the Google Cloud issues.
Wow. Okay, so that's a direct hit on actual commerce, people trying to buy and sell things.
Definitely. Businesses couldn't operate smoothly. And then you look at sort of the cutting-edge AI.
Right, ChatGPT.
OpenAI, yeah, the company behind ChatGPT. They reported login problems. Specifically, things like single sign-on issues. That's how a lot of users access the service easily. They had to put out messages saying their teams were working on it, trying to resolve it.
So everything from shopping online to accessing the latest AI tools was potentially affected?
It seems so. And if you look at platforms like Down Detector, where users report outages themselves, they showed over 13,000 reports flagging problems with Google Cloud right at the peak.
13,000.
Yeah.
That gives you a sense of the sheer number of individuals, actually experiencing issues firsthand.
Yeah, it's a significant number. And even other infrastructure providers felt the ripple. Cloudflare, for instance.
Oh, interesting. They provide security and performance, right?
Exactly. They stated that a limited number of their services were impacted. Why? Because they rely on Google's infrastructure for certain functions.
Yeah.
They did note their core systems remain stable, which is important, but it just shows how interconnected even the providers themselves are.
That's a key point, the interdependence.
It is. And beyond those big names, the reports indicated issues for platforms really critical to developers and content creators. GitHub, Twitch.
Oh, wow. GitHub. Twitch.
Yeah, LangChain, Weights and Biases, GitLab, MailChimp, Replit. I mean, look at that list.
First.
It really is. This wasn't isolated to just one sector. It hit developer tools, streaming platforms, marketing tools, coding environments. It seems like it touched pretty much every facet of online activity that builds on these kinds of cloud services.
And geographically.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, say, the U.S. West Coast.
No, not at all. The disruptions were reported across North America, certainly, but also in Europe and even parts of Asia.
Hmm.
And there was also, interestingly, a lot of search activity around Firebase.
Google's platform for app developers.
Precisely. That suggests that developers, the people actively building and managing apps, were heavily impacted, probably scrambling to figure out what was going on with their services.
Yeah, you can imagine the panic. It really underscores how foundational these platforms are for, well, for building the tools that we all use every day.
It really does. Which brings us to the bigger picture, I think. Why does an outage like this, for Google Cloud specifically, resonate so much beyond the immediate inconvenience?
Right, here's where it gets really interesting, strategically speaking. Google Cloud is, well, it's the third major player in a fiercely competitive market.
Behind AWS and Azure?
Exactly. They're trailing Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. They've been working incredibly hard to gain market share, partly leveraging the huge surge in demand for cloud services driven by AI and just general enterprise digital transformation.
Exactly right. And so an extended downtime event like this one, it's particularly damaging for a platform that's actively trying to establish itself as a rock-solid, reliable alternative to those market leaders.
Yeah, reliability is the main selling point, isn't it?
It's paramount. Trust is everything in cloud computing, especially when you're talking about large businesses moving their critical operations over. A significant outage like this it can quickly erode that confidence and really hurt their momentum.
And the context around this event, based on the reports we're looking at, adds another layer, doesn't it?
It does. Google's parent company, Alphabet, has been implementing some pretty significant cost-cutting measures recently. Layoffs, too.
Right, including in areas like sales and customer support, apparently.
And this inevitably raises an important question. It's one that sources indicate critics are already asking.
Which is?
Could these efficiency drives, these staffing changes, potentially have impacted the platform's resilience? Or maybe the speed and effectiveness of their emergency response when an incident like this actually happens?
So just to be clear, that's a question being raised by critics based on the reporting, not a confirmed cause.
Absolutely not confirmed. But it's a question that's definitely out there in the marketplace now. And it adds to the scrutiny around Google Cloud's operational strength right at this critical time for them.
It definitely puts a spotlight on those kinds of internal decisions. And it's also notable, I think, that the reports mentioned AWS confirmed no actual outages on their end during the same period.
Yeah, that contrast was made.
Even as the reports about Google Cloud were surging, that contrast, it just highlights the intense focus on uptime, on reliability, as a key competitive differentiator in this whole space.
It really does. It serves as a very direct point of comparison for potential customers who are evaluating different providers. Reliability is king.
So, okay, let's look at the current status then, and maybe the broader implications going forward. As of late Thursday, when this article came out, Google was still investigating the root cause.
Right, still digging.
Reports indicated about 13 cloud services were identified as affected, and customers were seeing kind of varied results in terms of recovery. Some systems coming back online, others maybe still unstable.
And Google's public updates, they continue to direct users to their official status page, just confirming teams were, quote, actively working to restore full service. The focus seemed to shift from just diagnosing to actually fixing things.
Makes sense. So, stepping back from the immediate firefighting, what does this whole episode signify? For the future of cloud computing, maybe. And certainly for the businesses that rely on it.
Well, this incident will undoubtedly, I think, reignite discussions around cloud reliability and maybe more importantly, the absolute necessity for robust backup and disaster recovery planning.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder, isn't it? Even the biggest providers, the ones you assume are infallible, can experience significant outages.
Exactly. No one is immune.
So for any business that's built on cloud infrastructure, whether they were directly affected this time or not, this becomes a major data point.
A case study, almost.
Yeah. The reports suggest businesses will likely be reviewing their strategies now, maybe considering diversifying their cloud providers, implementing multi-cloud or hybrid cloud setups.
Or at the very least, ensuring they have really robust fail-safes and contingency plans in place, so they aren't completely paralyzed if one piece of their tech puzzle suddenly falters like this.
Right, avoiding putting all eggs in one basket.
Pretty much. It's both a significant challenge Google Cloud now has to overcome, perception-wise and technically, and it's also a clear wake-up call for the entire industry. It just emphasizes again that critical need for resilience in the digital infrastructure that, frankly, we all depend on now.
How Google addresses this publicly and technically is going to be really key for them going forward in this hyper-competitive sector.
Absolutely. Transparency and action will be crucial.
Okay, so let's try and bring this together then. We've covered how a disruption originating within Google Cloud at around, what was it, 10:51 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday, June 12th,
Yep.
how that rapidly spread, causing widespread outages, and impacting incredibly diverse range of services. Everything from global e-commerce like Shopify to leading AI services like ChatGPT, developer tools like GitHub, streaming like Twitch, even other internet infrastructure providers, and across multiple continents.
Yeah, a huge ripple effect. And we've placed this event within that broader strategic landscape of the cloud market. Discuss Google Cloud's position. Number 3, trying to gain ground.
Right.
The critical importance of trust for their growth. And how this outage intersects with those questions being raised about resource allocation and response capabilities, especially following recent cost cutting.
And we've looked at what this means for the immediate aftermath, the ongoing investigation, the recovery efforts, and also the essential conversations it prompts about resilience, about backup strategies, about the underlying stability, really, of the digital world we all inhabit.
This event really just pulls back the curtain, doesn't it, on just how interconnected everything is online. Sometimes you don't see it until something breaks.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which leaves us and you with a pretty significant question to ponder, I think. What does a major outage like this, affecting a core piece of internet infrastructure like Google Cloud, what does it make you think about how profoundly interconnected our digital world really is? I mean, everything from just communicating with friends to running major global businesses relies on these few massive platforms. So what happens when a foundational piece like this experiences significant issues? How much is truly riding on the stability of these kind of central points?
Yeah, and what are the alternatives?
Exactly. What might be the alternative approaches, or maybe the necessary fail-safes that businesses and maybe even individuals might need to understand or perhaps implement moving forward? Something to think about.